Welcome to the review of the Pattoo Agents software project that the Palisades Foundation has on its GitHub account. For those of you who may not know, Pattoo is a piece of software that allows you to track data over time. It's done through the use of various types of data collection agents, which then post data to a central Pattoo API server, which has a database, a relational database, usually MySQL. And then from there, Pattoo users can then visit a well-known web page to see the charts of the data that the agents have then posted previously. So there are different types of agents that can be created. And as you can see here, the agents have some amount of interaction with the Pattoo API and database. But that doesn't mean that there's only one type of agent. There can be many different types of agents that could be posting data. Data could be things like the performance of computer systems. They could be stock market prices. There could be market prices of various types of products, or they could also be other things such as the results of various types of queries of mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, networking equipment, etc. And what this review is going to do is to show you ways in which you can actually create agents for yourself using the PattooShared Python 3 library. So if you want to know more about PattooShared, you can install it using pip or pip3 because Pattoo uses the Python 3 language. And you can visit the actual code itself by going to the GitHub account for the Palisades Foundation, where you will see the PattooShared repository in which you can actually take a look at all the various pieces of code and see for yourself how this is all done. And so PattooShared is a Python module. It defines ways in which the web app in which you go and see the charts interacts with the central Pattoo API server. It also determines how the API interacts with the database. So data is received from the database and then presented through to the web user through the web app, and the PattooShared libraries help to do that. And then finally, the PattooShared libraries also provide definitions of how the agents interact with the API itself and then ultimately put the data into the database. Now, the agents work in a very standardized way. They send data in key value pairs. And in another video, we will show you how it's actually done. But conceptually, here is how it happens. Say, for example, you're going to be charting some sort of information. In this particular case, we are using the price of oranges. And so the key is the price of oranges. And the value at any moment in time is the value of the price of oranges in that particular season. And so in this particular case, we have a value of $10. So you have a key of the price of oranges and a value of $10. But there may be other types of key value pair information that makes this even more meaningful. Now, what sort of other information could this be? Well, another key could be the source of that information. It doesn't really change with time, like the price of oranges, but it makes the information that you have on your chart more meaningful. And so, for example, here we have the source of that information. And in this case, we got this information from a particular market, the constant spring market, for example. Now, there could be other types of information that would be useful. For example, the vendor, the person who actually sold you the oranges, or the person that you got this information from at the market, is meaningful as well. In this case, we have a key, and the key is the vendor, and name of the vendor is Mr. Jones. So You're charting the information, the price of oranges, over time, and each of the lines on your chart will have associated key value pairs that makes it more meaningful. So you'll have a line of the price of oranges, and then you'd have, for example, uh, titles and subtitles such as the source being Constant Spring Market or the vendor being Mr. Jones, or you could have this information at the bottom of the charts depending on how the web application is written. Pattoo has a standardized web application, but there's no reason why you couldn't write your own web application using the API that Pattoo has in the background. So in the Pattoo libraries, we call the key value pair, the one that is changing with time, we call that a data point. And the data that makes it more meaningful is the data about data, and that's what we call metadata. So each agent sends data point information with associated metadata. Now, this may seem to be very complicated, but we will talk about it a little later on to show how easy it is to do this automatically using the PattooShared libraries. So how do you create these data points in the first place? Well, here we have it. You first import the data point and data point metadata classes from the PattooShared variables file. And then from there, you instantiate it. And so in this particular case, we say we have a data point and it's equal to data point with a instantiated key and value pair. And so first you start with a data point, which is fairly clear. And in the case previously, we would have the key being the price of oranges, and then the value would be the actual value of the oranges, $10 in that particular case. And then you can create metadata. And very similarly, the metadata has keys and values. And you assign the key, or in this particular case, M key 1 and M key value 1, to the first piece of metadata, and then you do the same thing for the second key of metadata. And the data point object has a method called add, and it only accepts metadata type objects in it. And so therefore in this case, we add the metadata to the data point, metadata 1, and then we add the metadata 2 to the data point. And so we keep this object, and we're going to use this for later reference. So you've got the metadata, you've essentially inserted the metadata information into the data point, and now we're going to have to figure out how do we get it to the central Pattoo server. And we'll talk about that next. The concept that is very important to all of this is the concept of a target. So you may find yourself having to get data point data from different sources. And so therefore, let's say, for example, you are trying to get the same market prices for oranges, but you may be wanting to get market prices for fruit in general. And so you would go to the market and get different data point values. You get a data point value for apples, a data point value for oranges, for tangerines, whatever the fruit is. And they may all have the same metadata. You may go to the Constant Spring Market in all of those cases, and you may get all that information from Mr. Jones, or it could be somebody else. But the ultimate target is that you got all this information from a single source. And so whatever that source is, you're going to need to wrap that source around all the data points that you got from that source. So in this particular case, the target is a source of a data point. And in this case, we've got many of these key value pairs. And so we have one target that could be getting these key value pairs, and it's a particular website. Or you could be having other key value pairs and getting it from an internal system, maybe within a business, an ERP system, for example. All right, so now how do you make the target accept all these metadata points and the data points that we spoke about before? Well, that is also relatively easy. You import the target data points class from PattooShared variables. You instantiate it to say that I'm getting all of these data points from site A, and then you add the various data points to the target. Now, you can add multiple data points altogether. So this add will accept a list of data points. It will also accept a single data point. It is intelligent enough to determine what type of object is being accepted and makes the appropriate changes internally. So now you've got this target with multiple data points in it. What's next? What's the next thing that you need to do? Well, there's the whole question of an agent. An agent is responsible for getting data from multiple different targets. And so one of the things that we also now need to do is to add the targets to the agent. And that also is very similar to the tasks that we had before. With the data points, you did an addition of all the metadata. With the targets, you added the data points to the targets. And then with the agents, we add the targets to the agent. And so here we go. From PattooShare.variables, you import agent polled data. You give the agent a name. You give it a polling interval because you want to know how frequently you're polling this information. And this is used as a point of reference for the API when the data is actually inserted into the database. It's just so that when the web part of the API is receiving the data, it knows how to space the data in the charting and then present that on the far end. So this is an important piece of information to have. And so once again, you instantiate the agent object with the agent name and the polling interval. And then at the very last line, as you can see here, you do the add of the agent. So you do the add of the target to the agent. And then now you've got this agent object. The agent object has one or more targets. And similarly, you can add a list of targets, or you can have a single target. It doesn't matter. It figures it out all by itself. So you have the agent, which has a number of targets, and each target has a number of data points, and each data point has a set of metadata assigned to it. And then finally, you need to send this data to the Pattoo server in the background. And the way that you do that is that you import the um, post agent class, you instantiate it with the agent, as we see here, and you just do a post, and it's done. Now, there are a number of features for uh, the agents that we're going to talk about. Um, it the Pattoo shared variables.py, it contains classes for agents, for targets, for data points, for data point metadata. I'd suggest that you take a look at the Pattoo shared GitHub repository, take a look at the variables.py and see the logic of the code behind it. It'll provide insights into the logic and the motivations for how this is all done. And you'll see that having multiple sets of key value pairs and that you have this hierarchy of agents, targets, and data points makes it much easier to present data to the far end, and it makes the coding a lot easier as well. So if you've ever wanted to do a web scraping script and have key value pairs, you can lump all of these things into this sort of methodology, post it to the central Pattoo server, and then get the data out on the Pattoo website. All right, so let's continue a little further. How do you write your own agent? What sort of examples are there? So we've done this in theory, but we also have examples under the PattooShared repository as well. If you want to write your own agents, the very first thing that you want to do is to use Python 3 and install the PattooShared library. So from the command line, you do pip3 install PattooShared, and it'll install it into your system. And then from there, use these sample scripts in this particular directory to give you an idea as to how to write it. Now we have two different types of examples. We have one in which the agent just runs once and stops, and then we have another one called sample agent daemon, which will stay resident in memory and run over a specific period of time. So it'll pull for the data, send it to the central API server, and then wait for a predefined period. It'll wake up and then run again. The sample agent daemon.py, you will start it by running the command sample agent daemon py dash dash start to make it start, dash dash stop to make it stop. All of this is very visible in the help for the script, and you'll be able to figure out how to write something for yourself using the examples that we have here. Now, I want to talk about some of the agent features that happen behind the scenes. Firstly, they automatically send data to the Pattoo server as JSON. And there's automatic failure protection. The JSON data is stored to disk if the Pattoo server is not available. And so when the server returns, the agents automatically detect it on the next time that they do their polling and then send the data to the server. So the way it works is that the agents poll for their data from the various sources, create their data points, create their targets, and then tries to send the data to the central API server. If that API server is unavailable, the data is automatically stored in a cache directory, and the agent stops and waits for the predefined period of time and then polls for the information again from all the various targets, etc. If the server is now available, it will post the information that it has just pulled from its various targets, and then afterwards searches on the cache area to see whether there are any leftover files that had failed to be posted, and then posts that data afterwards. And so you, as a coder, don't have to worry about this sort of instrumentation. You can use the Pattoo libraries to do this all for yourself. Well, that is the summary of how the Pattoo agents work. I hope this has been very informative. Please look at some of our other videos on the Pattoo project and see whether this is something for you. Thank you very much.